Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Pierce County Council for the purposes of a council budget retreat. It is Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. It is November already. The time is 9:38 a.m. All members are present except for Vice Chair Campbell and Councilmember Herrera. I believe we expect them here shortly. Item 2 is approval of our agenda. Is there any objection to our agenda as presented? Not seeing any, our agenda will stand approved. Item number 3, some brief opening remarks. I'm going to actually start by drawing everyone's attention to communication that came from Mr. Boki last night to members. Can I do that? Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, which one?
Which one?
What you emailed out last night? We'll come back to it to make sure Mr. Boki is comfortable. Yeah.
Well coordinated. I'm sorry.
Caught me by surprise.
I'm sorry. Sorry to catch you off guard. I try not to do that.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not on the, we're gonna get on,
Sorry.
it's all good.
I'll check.
Mr. Boki sent out last night updated models from Finance Department. Mr. Boki, so this came in at 5:59 p.m. in your busy inbox. So close to 6 p.m. last night. Mr. Boki, this is important modeling information that we're using to make our assumptions as the council puts its budget together. So I think just a moment on this information will be important so that we're all grounded with the same information. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Please.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Mello, Paul Boki, council staff. What you received, and first thank you, because this is created by the Finance Department, Ms. DeMuth and Mr. Robinson. So we thank they and their staff for putting this information together a little later today. So the first page is the monthly sales tax activity. And you see there's the 2022 actuals in a blue. There's the 2023 budget, and then there's the 2023 actuals. And you will receive, momentarily, I've pulled the information up on the sales tax collections because they have now arrived at the state. And they were, down for the general fund. They were down significantly. I have a difference of about $654,000 compared to last year, and it's well below budget. Ms. DeMuth can probably tell us now. You see their year-to-date October sales tax collections are $3.3 million below budget, or about 3.1%. The updated sales tax forecast in 2023, sales tax collections will be about 1.6% below 2022 levels. So, that if that trend continues, we'll see if it gets better or worse. And of course, sales tax numbers are subject to a lot of monthly variation. So they gave us a number of different models here, and so this is important to follow. The first is the executive proposed budget, the risk model. This is what you've received. The assumptions, they increased the 2023 interest earnings by an additional $13.5 million for a total of $17.6 million in 2023. They reduced the 2023 sales tax projection to reflect no growth for 2022 collections. And they're estimating now $30 million in under expenditures for 2023. So then what you see there is the blue bar graph is the one I think everybody is familiar with. That is your fund balance percentage. Remember, our goal is 15%. So at the end of the year, we will be at 42%, which is a very healthy fund balance. And it would begin the reduction, and the budget as proposed to you right now has it dropping to a little less than 32% by the end of 2025. Still very healthy, but then you can see the decrease. So the next Next slide. So the next slide revises a few assumptions. The increased interest earnings by an additional 10.4 million for a total of $28 million in 2023. A revised sales tax projection also has the under expenditures. So there's a little bit increase, and then you see the changes there. So the next one on page 4.
This is the one to really pay attention to.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah, okay.
I can say that.
Yes, yeah.
This is the one you should really pay attention to.
Yeah, in my email, I worked on the language a little bit because I didn't want to sound too alarmist or anything like that. So, but this is a very important one. This is a revised projection with increased public radio rates. So what you've been discussing or you've been asked to consider is this would cause a increase in the general fund expenses, almost exclusively, I believe, for the Sheriff's Department and Corrections Department, of about $1.1 million a year, $2.2 million over the biennium. And that's that's added on to the other projections, the other changes that they've made in interest earnings and the assumptions about under expenditures and whatnot. So you see here a more precipitous drop. So by the end of the biennium, you're at about 32%. And within 5 years, 2028, you're just over the other the 15% goal. So this is probably becoming the most likely scenario is what I would think, given the feedback that I'm receiving from members. And so again, there's assumptions in there about wages and whatnot, and finance could answer your questions in that regard. You get 5-6 years out. I mean, assumptions are hard to do, right? About pay rates, rate of inflation, and those kind of things. So everybody does their best on those. So, and then the next item is if you just do a one-time $2.2 million one-time, which would just be, and you get something worked out for future bienniums. So
on the radio issue.
On the radio issue, so that this won't continue past this
Up to them.
this biennium. So the 2023-24 biennium is impacted, but you're in a little bit better shape in the what I would consider to be the 5-year. You're a little bit higher at 19.1% fund balance.
Thank you, Mr. Boki. This information's hot off the presses. All of these models, documents are in an email from Mr. Boki in your inbox from last night at about 6 p.m. But I wanted to make sure we have some discussion about this, as this will directly relate to the budget the council advances. Questions about what we just learned before we get into what we had planned for this morning? Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. I guess this would go to finance staff to clarify. I know that in this current budget proposal, we've got, we reduced the number of deputies. And I know that I've asked you this, what would happen if those deputies were returned to a budget? This is just radios. It's not putting back any of the other public safety things that have changed as far as FTEs. It's just the radio as far as the impacts.
Julie Demuth with the Finance Department. That's correct, Councilmember Hitchin. So it does not assume the restoration of the 14 law enforcement deputies that are, so 12 are reduced in the proposed budget, another 2 are converted to different classifications. So we have 14 deputies that we would potentially be looking to restore in future years. It also, the model doesn't include projected under expenditures beyond 2023, but it also doesn't assume growth outside of our compensation and fixed costs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Other questions? Councilmember Denson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Boki. Could you just explain to me what under expenditures are? What does that mean?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Thank you. Under expenditures we budgeted a certain number and then the expenses are come in less than that. I imagine most of them are vacancy savings. And there's just other things that, and this is just a general fund, right? So there's not a lot of capital items in the general fund, but things just don't get spent. So, and mostly that's vacancy savings, I would say.
And this just is saying that typically we're $30 million under.
I don't think they're projecting that going forward. And I would expect that given the budget reductions that the general fund departments have had to take, which is in the neighborhood of $20 million in their base, that number is going to be harder to achieve in the future. And, you know, I may be wrong, but if they're able to hire up and you're taking a number of vacant positions out of the budget, that money is now gone. And so I think that the $30 million spent under expenditure number is going to be much more difficult to achieve.
So was it 30 million for 2020, just this year?
Yeah, it is.
So we don't know what it's going to be moving forward. It's just for this year.
Right.
Okay, and I guess the only other thing that I would mention is these projections are based on what Department of Emergency Management is telling us the radios are costing now. As you know, DEM is working with the city of Tacoma and Puyallup on a single system. We don't know if those costs are going to go up or down. I think most people obviously are hoping that there's some efficiencies and they're going to go down. Director Ferguson stood here and told us they could go up. So I just wanted to throw that out there. This is if nothing changes. And actually 1.1 can't even be right either because they've gone up significantly. Last year, the amount, I'm just basing it on the amount to subsidize the rate between Pierce County and Tacoma systems. Last year, and for the past 2 years at least, it's been 1.3 million. Well, last year and this year. For the next 2 years, we were told it's 1.8 million. So, I mean, it obviously goes up and it will, I assume, continue to go up as things do. So there's some more pleasant news for us.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for starting with that, everyone. For the record, Vice Chair Campbell has joined us. Thank you. We're going to get into our planned council budget discussion this morning, and we're scheduled to finish up at about lunchtime. And we do not have an afternoon session today because a number of members have a Board of Health meeting this afternoon. So we only have time scheduled between for the morning session. And we are scheduled to focus on the American Rescue Plan Act investment strategy and capital improvement projects. So starting with the American Rescue Plan Act, the council, when the council did its budget priorities, and we stated our budget priorities specifically for the American Rescue Plan Act. We said to ourselves, you know, this isn't fully inclusive, but we said to ourselves, we do have some initial thinking about some initial priorities about ARPA. And the council said that our initial priorities for ARPA include rapid rehousing and housing stabilization programs and our homelessness response. We said that programs to reduce food insecurity were a priority. We said that youth and young adult paid employment programs were important for workforce development, for skill building, keeping young people out of trouble and building their skills and getting out of poverty. It hit a number of priorities for us. And broadband expansion and broadband access opportunities were also a stated priority of the council for continual ARPA investment. The executive proposes in his budget various initiatives. We've begun discussing them in various ways, some in committee of the whole. EIDC just recently began, just this week. I listened into the EIDC's conversation about the potential small business safety and security grant program, how that might interplay with the current innovation grant program. So the executive is proposing $3 million for this. $1.6 million for community response transition fund. This is in the human services space. And Director Moss spoke a little bit about this in her budget presentation. And there's an email from us, from Lee Beth Merrick on our staff from 8:44 this morning that also speaks to this. For the record, Councilmember Herrera has joined us. So Community Response Transition Fund, it's in the human services space. More information from Ms. Merrick. Director Moss spoke to this a little bit. $1.2 million for food insecurity in the executive's proposal. $4.5 million for this community restoration and cleanup initiative. Director Tatotson spoke to this. Both times she was in front of us at the committee of the whole, and there's been some follow-up material about what the early thinking is about that cleanup initiative. The executive is proposing $5 million go to the Justice Center facility improvements above and beyond the bond dollars for 1501 Market and Justice Center improvements. The executive is asking council for $5 million for additional capital improvements of the Justice Center. $800,000 in the executive's proposal for young adult internship employment opportunity. I'm interpreting this as our Higher Pierce County program, our paid youth internship program that we did in partnership with Workforce Central. And then you see some other spending, a lot of it carry over, some of it plussed up, some of it carried over because it wasn't spent, some of it plussed up in the box below. For example, the Pierce County Business Accelerator started that program last biennium. In the executive's proposal, this is plussed up a little bit to 3.85 million into the new biennium. That's an example of a plus up in the exec's proposal. And we see the other items here. Some of them repeated up above, but some of them we have not, they're not called up in the box above, I think mainly because they're carry forward from the previous biennium. So the question to council is this ARPA proposal as proposed by the executive, the council's priorities? What's missing? How would the council change this ARPA proposal to better meet our priorities? Questions, thoughts? Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. There are a number of items on here that I really appreciate. One of the things that I really want to kind of make sure that we're intentional is thinking about the unified regional approach. I think that we need to invest in the legwork to get that set up, because when ARPA is gone, we're still going to be working and going to need to carry on this work. And it's going to become more challenging because we won't have ARPA COVID response dollars. So being intentional about setting it up so that it's going to work regionally while we have these one-time dollars, I think is a really important investment in ARPA, because the long game of that is going to be impactful, especially with the Maureen Howard Act dollars that we now have as far as addressing some of our housing crisis issues, which we know is one of the reasons we have a homelessness issue. So I think that we've put a lot of things into play, but if we don't really dial in what that's going to look like, it will become untenable. And then all of the groundwork that we have created, the work that we've done, the comprehensive plan to end homelessness is going to just go back up on the shelf, which is we promised as a council that it's not going to be a go back on the shelf. We are really going to work hard to address homelessness in all its different ways as a council and a county. So I think that's something that is loosely called out in here, like I think it's in here, but I think it needs to be very intentional. Here's a dollar amount, here's a work, like, here's what's gonna happen. We have to know that that's gonna happen in the next 2 years.
Thank you. Before I turn to Vice Chair Campbell, I should have called out just, there's a lot of supplemental material in the packet, as folks know. The digital packet is 244 pages long. We're not going to go through the entire packet. But if, Mr. Weinsberry, if you just go to the next slide, this is in the packet right after this chart. So you'll see in the digital packet more information on the entire budget proposal, and our staff work to tease out what's fully expended from what we appropriated in the current biennium, what needs to be reappropriated because there's a contract and they're in the middle of spending or in the very early stages of spending. What's just a complete reappropriation. So this chart and the next couple of pages in the packet are all inclusive of all ARPA items as proposed by the executive. We're of course thinking about what we want to be in our ARPA proposal, but I wanted to make sure folks knew how to read this chart and track where things are at in terms of things we've already committed to in the current biennium, under contract, in the middle of spending. And it's organized in the topic areas that we've been talking about for some time, like economic stabilization and recovery, community response and resiliency, so on and so, essential government services, community groups. So it's organized in the way that the council has been bucketing this for a little while. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this information, although I know there was some that I asked for it to be broke out by what the interest was funding and versus what was ARPA funds. And I see reallocated and interest got merged together, but because interest doesn't have the same constraints on it as the regular, we want to make sure we're not spending that first. And I still don't know which ones are coming from the ARPA fund and which ones are coming from the interest fund, at least on this chart. Do we have that in a separate?
Yeah, we received that from, and I thought we had sent that to you.
It's just the building, isn't it?
Then I will,
And yeah,
I will look for that and I will move back to
5 million of it goes to the building.
the things to discuss. One is the for food insecurity. I think we're about halfway there. Because when you really break that down, that's about $50,000 a month. And you, right? No. Have to redo that math. But by the time you have what EFN needs to make sure that their warehouses are stocked, but then a portion of what they do goes out to all the community banks or all the food banks around the community, 70 some food banks. It's being divided down to very small amounts going out to food banks. And so I think we need to increase that allocation significantly. I will note, and I don't, under the Sheriff's Department hiring incentives program, as we did look at the numbers, we found out that it was funded for 24, 25, and 26. Well, why that one and not any of the others? Have any thought? Why are we not thinking about holding over many of the other programs? So we need to focus on the money in this budget. And so I think that that's, wow, both a good idea to plan for 26. I don't know that we should be reserving funds for 26 in that way, or at least that line item compared to other line items. So either we need to do it for all, or we need to just work with the money that we have in this year's budget. And so I know that I do hope to expand it and include the juvenile justice officers. So perhaps not pulling all of it out of the. And I had one other thought, and it has since left me, so I will come back to it while giving others a chance.
Thank you for continuing the discussion with specificity. The specificity certainly helps. Councilmember Morel.
Thank you. Appreciate Councilmember Campbell's thoughts. On economic development, understand that we are no longer offering the innovation grants program. If that's my understanding, because there was no money appropriated for it in this biennium, it looks like the thought is shifting those dollars to the safety and security program. Is that the train of
That's
thought
the
here?
executive's train of thought, I think.
That's the executive's proposal.
Right.
In my listening to the EIDC conversation, I heard the EIDCs continue to bat around. Do we keep the shell of the innovation grant and say, if you want to put an emphasis on safety and innovation grant, but continue to use the shell of that program? I heard you all still batting that around.
Yeah, I'm just saying is if we're gonna start shifting ARPA dollars, in this particular case, you're not only taking it away from safety and security grant program, you're also taking it away from the innovation grant program. Because I think, in discussions with some folks, we kind of want to repackage that, rename it, and send it back out again to cities. Like I was in my amendment to do 15,000 and below, which would open it up to a lot more jurisdictions in Pierce County, which means, that because one of the things we've had with the innovation grants is just capital projects take so long to permit that they just couldn't get the expenditures in time out. And a lot of these companies just said, no, I'll just go through it, do it myself. So if there was a way to kind of repackage that and, rename both the safety and innovation, I would definitely look at that. I don't know then if you want to cut funding for it, because as we have raised the eligibility of other jurisdictions, like Councilmember Campbell indicated, that, what did you say, $50? Is it worth that? So on that, on the food insecurities, following up on what Councilmember Hitchin had said, I want to make sure with these ARPA dollars, we're building a solid foundation that these nonprofits can build off of. Because if we're just giving them money to maintain and they're not being innovative and they're not looking at their business model, changing their business model, once the ARPA funding runs out, what are they going to do? They're not going to be able to move forward. They haven't made any structural changes to how they deliver their services. And I'm a little concerned about organizations that just want operational dollars without any innovation in how they're going to move forward after 2025. So I'll be looking at that if it's just operational dollars, I don't know if I'm in agreement with that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councilmember Denson?
Yes, thank you. I'm building off of what Councilmember Morel commented on in terms of economic stability. One thing that I would like to see in regards to that security grant program is perhaps a renaming to incorporate the idea of the innovation grant program, calling it something like small business strengthening and security grant program. So it has the same purposes of the innovation grant, all of the capital things, which includes the safety improvements, but we also really call out the safety. So security and safety grant program. And then obviously we're gonna have to look at the amount given all of the demands. A couple other things that I wanted to mention, the health department, they provided me a proposal for basically $175,000 to help them get caught up from their report of system status, the RSS process during COVID, which came to a grinding halt when all hands had to be shifted to addressing COVID. So $175,000 for the health department. That would be really awesome, I think, for the unincorporated areas, so we can make sure that we are caught up and helping them get back going. And good or bad, the housing market has slowed down a bit. So hopefully they can also kind of leverage that slowdown to make sure they're caught up on all of their work there. Under broadband, no surprise, I would love for this to be plussed up a little bit. I think we got cut, I believe, 3.7 million. If we could get a couple million back into the broadband program, that would be great for one last effort at getting a couple of partnerships going with our private providers in the rural areas. This is a really good chance to get some good work done. And then I mentioned this when we had our human service cow, but I would like to see some specific money called out for one or more homeless stability sites, the sanctioned encampments. We had a good discussion about that. More money for safe parking sites. I think there's 150,000 in here. Is that right?
Yes.
That's not very much. So I'd like to see more. That's proven really effective. And then I would love to see like $3 million transferred to the Community Development Corporation so that they can actually fulfill their purpose of creating and preserving affordable housing, really get them going on their work. Thank you.
Thank you for those specific ideas. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thinking of confidence, because we have to get these dollars out the door really by probably June of this next year. If you can't show this will be spent, then we have to pull it back, because it has to be put into something that will guarantee it'll be spent, or we send it back. So what is our confidence level on some of these larger ticket ones? Broadband for one, the sewer municipal partnerships in the Pierce County Village, that all of those will have those dollars guaranteed out the door, because that's almost half of what's here.
Water sewers, the easiest one to answer in my mind. It's the most straightforward one, and they presented to committee a few times, and I think they're all under contract and at different stages of implementation.
So I would agree with the chair that particular category is the one where there's the highest level of confidence that the monies will be obligated in the time period required. As the chair indicates, those projects are well underway in terms of the necessary agreements and planning with the entities receiving the dollars. So that I think that has a very high degree of confidence as reported by the department on that particular category.
The other two, as you point out, Vice Chair Campbell, have, so I think that one has a lot of high degree of confidence for lots of reasons in public works departments, and we know how to permit and put in sewer and water and get the broadband stuff. Folks are working hard. We have, it's incentive program. It's trying to incent the private sector to do stuff. Some are biting, some aren't, and so there's some uncertainty there. We're trying to fix things. I'm sure Councilmember Denson wants to chime in about that. So we'll keep that thread going. And then, of course, we know the uncertainties with the Community First Village and permitting that. So we put a clear clock on the Community First Village through a proviso. We put a very clear clock on it that if it's not permitted by a date certain. The dollars get reissued. And we said at the time, we want to keep it in the permanent supportive housing space. And so the council made an intention that if it doesn't get permitted with certainty by a date certain, we don't want to turn the money back to Washington, DC. We want to reinvest the money in permanent supportive housing in our community. Councilor Denson, I'm sure you want to say something about
Mr.
broadband.
Taylor.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'll come back to Mr. Taylor.
Okay.
Probably the same thing Mr. Taylor's gonna say about broadband. That looks like a big number, but most of that is committed and contracted at this point. I think there's of that 10.2 million, I think there's 2.7 that isn't committed and contracted at this point. So what I was hoping when I made my comments was another 2 or 3 million added to that, still under $5 million that we would have to get contracted next year. It is a big lift, I will admit. So I don't want to turn that money back either. So, you know, if we can think about a way that like by date certain, if this is not going to happen, we're going to shift that money elsewhere. I am absolutely fine with that. Maybe Mr. Taylor has more to add.
I would, that's correct, that as the council member described it, with one exception, and that is one of the areas of spending of that broadband money that's currently planned and is underway is the incentive program. I don't believe the agreements have been actually signed yet. They've been prepared. They've been through review by the respective entities. They're close to signature. By the end of the year, all of those will be signed. So there will be a roughly $8 million plus obligated of the 10.2 that's in there through either contract, a couple of contracts or these incentive agreements. So I just wanted to let you know, one of them still hasn't been signed yet, but it's close.
Any day now. And we're also, I know the department is also working on its incentive program to shift the criteria so that more of our private providers are willing to partner with us. Because the criteria at one point shifted. The private providers, most of them said, well, now we're not interested. So now we need to look at what we need to do to be able to bring those partners in. And they're looking at that.
Vice Chair Campbell?
So I guess I would those are just a couple of big ticket ones. Is there anything when we look at this that we don't have confidence in?
To help answer that question, just want to remind folks, there's lots of information in the packet, including to the question Vice Chair Campbell's causing for the affordable housing projects we invested in through what we call the enhanced NOFA, the enhanced notice of funding availability. There's status updates in the packet there. I feel confident that those projects are advancing. They're all at different stages of permitting and leveraging their funds and construction. That's a big part of this. I think it's a really good question for us to zero in on. What else do we not? What's on the bubble? What are folks nervous about not performing? Councilor Denson.
I just had a question, actually, under this new piece of paper that was handed out under community response and resiliency, where it says emergency shelter services previously Tacoma Rescue Mission expansion 5.5. Is this new money? Because didn't we appropriate 5 million to them for their expansions?
That's a reappropriation.
So that money is nothing new. I don't know why it says previously, because it still is their expansion.
Yeah, it's for the expansion of the men's shelter. The select committee had their meeting at to double, more or less double.
So this isn't anything new.
It's not new money.
All right, thank you.
And we did follow up while there, and they're in stages of permitting, expect to be breaking ground early next year, mid next year, I should say.
We have certainty.
They express certainty.
Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Chair. I guess in looking at the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, seems like they are slow to get their reimbursable rates back. They're sitting on almost $6 million. Is there a reason why they haven't delivered on getting those funds?
Thank you, Councilmember Morel, Paul Boki, council staff. These estimates of the estimated amount of unspent money came from finance based upon, and it's my understanding that they had not received, as of the middle of the year or whenever this was put together, any invoices from the health department for 2023. We have recently, as staff, received some information from the health department that they are actually accumulating some expenses. I don't know why they haven't presented those invoices to finance, but they have indicated now to us in some emails that they do have something in the neighborhood of, I think, approaching $2 million in expenses. But
Okay, because I know, if memory serves me right, we were able to take some of their funds last time on, was it the supplemental? And because
Out of school.
you may have taken a little bit out. Yeah, you've been kind of nipping and tucking at some items here and there during the supplementals.
okay,
We took a lot from the school testing, as I recall, because that started to get figured out by the state and protocols started changing.
yeah, so I guess I'm looking at some of these allocations to see if they're really gonna be able to spend. I know they're winding down some of their staffing. And just wanna make sure that there again, those dollars get spent also, if they're can produce invoices.
Councilmember Morel, they have provided us with information. They've made some requests. They're not all ARPA based, but some are in other areas. But they have made a request for ARPA funding in 2024 and 2025 of $4.1 million
For COVID related
for
expenses.
COVID related expenses. Sorry. Yeah.
They've made some other requests in the budget. When they were here, we asked them about this, what's going on with your ARPA expenses? What need do you have on communicable disease and COVID in the next biennium? We also asked more generally about things like opioid, substance use disorder, and some other questions. So we got a proposal from the health department in response to that question. There's a $4.1 million ask that the health department has related to COVID in particular. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. And just, I want to make sure that I'm understanding, because what Councilmember Morel made me look back at this. The health department was not allocated any COVID response dollars in this next proposal, the one that came from the executive. It's all been swept, reappropriated. So the health department is no funding for COVID response in the next biennium.
That's my understanding of the
Okay.
executive's proposal.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was.
You may want 4.8,
4.1
4.1.
is the request. I'll add to the conversation a lot of. I too am looking for programs where we can largely get a boost. I think Councilmember Morel says it well. How do we look for a boost and lay good foundation? Others have said something like that. That's why I'm really looking forward to what we hear from Councilmember Hitchin and others in terms of what shot in the arm can we give the unified regional approach for homelessness work that should pay dividends for a long time to implement our comprehensive plan to end homelessness. And some of the other ideas that many members have brought forward. And we're still stabilizing folks who are on the edges, so things like safe parking we've just stood them up, right? We just improved code to make it more allowable. And organizations like Homeward Bound are, in my estimation, just getting their footing and establishing these great relationships with faith-based organizations and trusted neighborhoods. And we need to keep them going for a bit longer. And it's a real solution that is proving folks a pathway to rehousing, things like that. I'm also interested in, I think, things that also help keep people in their home. There's still a lot of people on the edge, so things that help get at eviction prevention, rental assistance and eviction prevention. There's a few strategies that we've invested in over the last biennium that I think we should continue to consider. I too, I hear Councilmember Denson and others enthusiasm for broadband, and I definitely hear that and share that. Not to take away from the hard infrastructure. I know that's a major priority of members. So not to take away from that, but to add to it the ability for folks to, because the ability for folks to gain more digital access skills. I think we all know there are so many people in our economy that are kept out of our economy because of the intimidation of technology. And there's significant barriers to accessing our world, economy, information, education, because of the lack of digital access skills. It seems like an area for us to think about investment to get more people engaged in the world. I remember us when the juvenile court was here. It's not a huge investment in my mind, though it pays major dividends. The youth diversion programs, the juvenile court was actually asking for a little more than $350. I think that's a priority of this council. I'll stop there with some of my thoughts. Councilmember Denson.
Yes, thank you. Those are all good thoughts, and they made me think of a couple others. You mentioned keeping people in their homes with eviction prevention. I also think we heard from our seniors about how important senior centers are in keeping seniors in their homes and healthy in their homes. So I don't know if that's an ARPA thing or not, but I know a number of us would like to plus up the amount of money that we give to our senior centers around the county. And then I also want to mention maybe thinking about putting some money into rural transportation pilot programs. To Councilmember Morell's point, this isn't a forever program, but if we can pilot some programs in different parts of the rural parts of the county, then that provides some data by which organizations or the county can then go after bigger dollars to sustain the program or figure out how they're going to sustain it. But the money for the pilots are really important. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
I don't know.
Councilmember Herrera.
I'll just add on to what Councilmember Denson said about the rural pilot transportation programs. I also am in favor of looking into doing that because there's needs out there, but we don't know exactly where the needs are, and I think pilot programs can give us an eye into the future of some of those needs. Youth diversion programs also is something that we got to keep our finger on, and for those, and we can't abandon that. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Morell.
Thank you. Love the rural pilot program. I agree with that. One of the things that I think Councilmember Hitchens and Chair Mello and Councilmember Campbell is aware of is I'm a little concerned about moving forward I've seen both nationally and within the state that several organizations are totally tapped out as far as their capacity to manage shelters. Tiny home villages, et cetera, they just do not have the capacity. I know, and I'll speak the Veterans Village, they've gone through 3 different managers in the last 4 years because of constant turnover in that industry. They have just voted in, the same as the Tacoma Housing Authority, to raise their wages. And hopefully that'll stabilize it. But, you know, we have asked a lot of, whether it be the Tacoma Rescue Mission, where Lehigh, you name it, a lot to stand up these operations. And I just don't know what the sustainability of them is going to be long-term. And I think I really want to look at that to find out, okay, great, we just put 40 units in a parking lot, how are you going to manage it? How are you going to oversee this thing? And so 3 years from now, when ARPA runs out, or, you know, how do we run our budget? I know that we've kind of crafted the Marine Howard to maybe impact that a little bit. But I just want to be forward thinking on some of these expenditures. I just don't want, oh, here you go, you know, here's 100,000, go forth and do good. And as far as broadband goes, and I know the chair, you brought this up, is there's a lot of money coming down from the federal government on specific programs. And, you know, you talked about grant writers, you know, is that a way that we can get in there and get some of those dollars that we've been unable to tap into? And get our fair share and make sure that the programs we're putting out now falls in line with federal guidelines are going to be, so we don't have to reinvent our procedures, our protocols, our guidelines, or whatever, and spend 6 months doing that. So I know that blending and braiding is a challenge when you're talking county, state, and federal dollars, but I think we need to make sure we're in line, so when those grants do come our way, we can turn them and get them out. And, you know, if they're $1 billion for hydrogen, okay, how are we gonna get our share? You know, broadband the same way, infrastructure the same way, climate resiliency the same way. Those are buckets that we need to make sure that we can go after. So those are my comments when we start looking at this. It's great to prop someone up for a while, but eventually, you know, how are they going to survive? What's the long-term sustainability? Thank you.
I certainly appreciate that. Someone's going to get the money. Either King County's going to get the money, or New York City's going to get the money, or San Antonio's going to get the money. Someone's going to get the money. So why not us? And we need to be organized in such a way to bring these dollars home, to create jobs and save money and move these priorities forward. So that really resonates with me. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the comments. It's one of the reasons I really want to make sure that we figure out a way to do the unified regional approach, because they can bring the whole county together. It's not a Tacoma problem. It's not a county problem. It's not a name another city's problem. It takes all of us. We all are experiencing people going in and out of different levels of homelessness, whether it's somebody fleeing domestic violence in Puyallup who lands in Tacoma because that's where our shelter is. And then what? Where do they go? Their communities in Puyallup. And so trying to figure out a way to really address it as a county, while we have all this data and we have all this energy, and there is some funding available to do that initial, probably more intentional work, I think will pay off in the end. It's about really thinking about it as a regional system. And it's not about funding programs. That when I say this, I'm not saying we're going to open up a shelter as a unified regional approach. This is quite literally, how do we make sure that we are all sharing the data, the information, and reporting what's going on in our communities so that we can better address gaps, problems. We don't have access to young adults that are entering homelessness in this part of the county. How do we approach that? Well, if I don't even know that's a problem, I can't do anything. I can't ask cities to partner if I don't know there's a problem. And yet the impacts to having many young adults entering homelessness in one region of our county impacts the rest of us. So how do we address that? Well, I got to know it's a problem. And that's what this unified regional approach, I think really, when I read it in the original comprehensive plan and kind of pushed on people to explain it, that's the goal. It's not a service provider. It is truly the center of the wheel that's going to make sure that all of our cities and all of our towns and the unincorporated parts of the county understand what's going on, where services are provided, where to find help, what's missing, and then helping our communities do better by responding appropriately to the crisis that we're in, so that hopefully we can get out of crisis and just be in management. We aren't going to eliminate homelessness, but again, I think the original goal is homelessness happens, but it's a short amount of time and we deal with it appropriately, no matter how you enter. So I think that's the goal. The other thing you said about programming, as I read the letter that came from both Ms. Merrick, which came from, I believe, our Human Services, the Community Response Transition Fund really is about, we've been funding safe parking in 2 years. How does safe parking stay afloat? And helping them work on that professional services, thinking about that, trying to line up grants. I think as I read it, it was going to all of the programs that have been plussed up through county budgets and provide them 2 years of thinking about what do you need to know to stand on your own. And that is how I interpreted that letter that we got on the Community Response Transition Fund. It's not just operating dollars. It's more about going into all of these nonprofits that have been stood up a little bit and saying, okay, you got to stand on your own in 2 years. What do you need to know? What do you not know right now? How to access funds, how to apply for permits, what do you need? How to hire good people? What have you just been able to do because you had money that's going to go away?
How to
And
diversify
that's,
revenue.
yeah, that's what that fund, as my understanding again, is for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Six.
I would just add the unified regional approach is the first and primary strategy as I read the comprehensive plan to end homelessness, and it's the first strategy on purpose. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know that I have tons of new things because I think we have the same problems everywhere. I get concerned over the maintenance that is needed after we have the program set up, which I think has been mentioned, and how are we going to pay to keep them up? The approaches for needing for the homeless, looking at the programs that have been successful and helping them continue. I've got in my district the Family Promise, where the pastor has made leaps about for putting that program together and then kind of working on building that up. The food security, I have concerns with as well on what's happening. I know there's a lot of food out there at places, but I believe more people have been patronizing. So I think there needs to
Almost doubled in the last year.
more, and why is that? And I'm not seeing food coming down in price. I'm not seeing land coming down in price. And so all these acquisitions, I'm just kind of hyperventilate with all these expenses we see coming, and savings are being depleted. People are going off home equity loans, paying off credit cards, and then now raising credit card balances back up. So I try to look at this, what's the long-term obligations that we have? I tend to want to go focus more on things that help the economic development, because if you don't generate the revenue, we can't pay for this. I know the parks and trails do attract people. So not losing sight of how important those are is a focus in my district and as others. And then the broadband, I know it seems like a long time, but that's going to help generate revenue because people can do home-based business, they can do research and connect more. And so that is an asset. And when you mention the need for people to engage in understanding digital, they need that connection to be able to do that. So that's all I have for the moment.
Thank you for those thoughts.
Thank
Other thoughts about the your ARPA wishes, your ARPA hopes? One thing I wanted to make sure I understand, I'm not seeing it on this page, and so, Mr. Boki, the jail confinement alternative program.
It is not, they made a request.
The sheriff's department made a request, or was it our probation department? I think I'm mixing it up.
It's the sheriff's department.
The sheriff's department made a request for the jail confinement diversion alternative program. Folks not appropriate to be in the jail, they can be at home with home monitoring equipment, frees up jail capacity for all the reasons we know. This is a request of the sheriff's department. The suggestion was, we funded out of ARPA previously. It's not in the executive's proposed budget, but this is something that's been brought to our attention for consideration. Everyone tracking?
A little over 400.
Little over 400 is the request from the sheriff's department for that.
420.
The young adult internship and employment opportunity, we've talked about this a few times in a couple of different settings. I know Mr. Swanson and Mr. Boki have been working to track down information. If council wants to do a 2-year program that is similar to the program we stood up 2 years ago, I think we're thinking about the likely need to blend these dollars with PASTA dollars or plus this up, and not take from PASTA, but just wanted to remind us about how to get to a 2-year program if that's council's desire. This is a good start, but the $800,000 doesn't get you to a 2-year program.
I
Mr. Campbell?
believe the 800,000 is a 2-year.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah.
That'd be cheaper if it is, good. That'd be great. I'm probably misremembering, so.
Double checking. I'll have confirmation by this afternoon.
On food insecurity, I think I'm hearing council's intent is to proviso this very clearly, that the dollars end up going to Emergency Food Network to reinvest in the broader system. That's council's wish. Not just open-ended 1.2 million for food insecurity. Like the wish is to be specific about what the intention is here, right?
Can we do that?
We can. Councilor Cooper?
Thank you, Chair. In a way, I would like to have some reserve for more local. I don't know that, I know some in my area do get service through the EFN, but I'd like to be able to have independent
You can do that
ability.
through the community needs fund. So your community needs fund appropriation, that's what you can use that for.
Okay.
Up to $150,000 for the biennium. You can direct to a food bank in your district, a senior center in your district. That's what the community needs fund is designed to do.
That's what passed yesterday.
Other thoughts? So things need to move around in order to accommodate council priorities. So taking this conversation in, we'll make an attempt to accommodate the top priorities of members and put something forward for consideration that we can beat up, and go from there. But this has been a really helpful discussion for folks to be specific about what their priorities are, what we like in the executive's proposal, where our priorities need to get fit in. And just to state the obvious, we can't do it all. And we're going to have to adjust the executive's proposal somewhat considerably in order to meet what the council priorities are. But it's a good start, and they brought forward some good ideas for us to begin thinking about. Anything else on the American Rescue Plan Act that anybody wants to share? Mr. Boki, what am I missing about the American Rescue Plan Act that you've been thinking about on our behalf?
I think this has been a really good discussion, and you've covered all the areas that we've been wondering about. So we'll work with what we got. That's great. It's a good discussion.
Councilmember Hitchin?
Thank you, Chair. I was just rereading the document that breaks down the interest. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. Is the $14.5 million at the bottom the grand total of the interest earnings from ARPA and CARES Act to date? Or, well, to the end of this year? We've earned $14.5 million in interest.
The interest earnings are an estimate from finance for 22, 23, 24, and 25.
Okay.
So not only what they've already received for just ARPA, the CARES Act money, I believe, was
That would be gone. by
that
now.
was put into,
Put into the
think it might have
ARPA
been.
dollars. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
we're getting a head nod on that. Yeah.
And these dollars are the only dollars out of ARPA that we don't have to, still have to obviously comply with all the laws, but we don't have to worry about having it spent, contracted by the end of 24 and spent by 26.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just want to make sure I was remembering everything correctly because different pots of money.
Thank you. Councilmember Morel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious on the 5 million for the Justice Center facility improvements. Did you get a response back to what that entailed?
Mr. Taylor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In your, for the next conversation this morning, capital facilities plan, there's a brief memo from facilities management that gives an indication of how it would be used. It's not a detailed project list, but it gives you kind of general categories that are planned.
Okay. And then since you're up there, Mr. Taylor, the Community First Village was brought up. I know that we wrote a pretty tight agreement with them as far as what dates they had to.
Correct.
What is the next date deadline?
So there is a funding agreement that's been executed that's being administered by Human Services with support from the Finance Department. The first date I think you're interested in is the date that they have to secure their special use permits and shoreline permits from the hearing examiner. That's April 1, 2024. That's the target set in the agreement. And then the commencement date for the project to actually break ground, at least have the permits to break ground, is August 1, 2024. If TRM fails to meet those dates, specifically the August 1 date, then that is cause to review the agreement and consider possible termination of the agreement, but it's not an automatic termination. It's the target date, and then it triggers review if those dates aren't met. And then there's reporting that's required by TRM throughout the process to finance and human services.
Okay, thank you for that update and reminding me of those dates, so that way we can make sure we monitor. That still gives us another year to reappropriate if we have to. Okay, thank you. Sure.
I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. It doesn't give us a year to appropriate. It gives us about 4 months to reappropriate. So if they don't have the permits to break ground by August 1, we have to reappropriate that money by the end of 2024 in order to keep the money local.
It would, the monies, my understanding is the funds would need to be obligated for
Obligated.
another purpose by the end of that year. So December 31, 2024.
So we'll have 4 months to re-obligate the funds.
Okay, got it.
But we can't after that. What that's locked in is what's locked in, and if that doesn't get spent, it goes away, and if it gets spent, it gets spent. So that's the last pass.
So let's just come back to that question that I believe Vice Chair Campbell also raised a little earlier before we move on to capital facilities. So we just illustrated on one of our major investments, the Community First Village. We put a lot of money into this idea, and they're working really hard at it. And we have an agreement where we're giving them as much time as is humanly possible before to succeed with the clock that we have with this cash. Otherwise, we have to re-obligate it as we just talked through. So we have a pathway for those dollars, a timeline and a pathway for those dollars. So I guess the conversation I want to cause is for everything else, not the Community First Village. What kind of reporting or what kind of clear deadlines does council want to set on the appropriation authority we give? By what date do you want to have a report and be told, this is just not going to happen? It was a cool idea. They worked really hard at it, but it's not going to happen. Council, please reappropriate the money so we don't have to return it to Washington, D.C. What is council's thinking and expectation about how to manage that? Councilor Hitchin?
Thank you, Chair. I think the deadlines that we set for the village, the initial reporting of April 1st, so obligating that you'll come back and give us your plan and like where you are, do you think this can actually happen? So however that gets stated, and then use the same August 1st so that we aren't doing a lot of different things as far as just budgeting and staff. We would know these 3 projects aren't happening. Here's the funding we can move, and it creates a larger bucket as opposed to having lots of different due dates. I think both for finance, for us, our staff, and community, it allows us to be cohesive. And we've already got these deadlines set in. We're expecting the report on April 1st. We'll know where they are. We're expecting a report August 1st if they made it past April 1st. So we'll be moving if something isn't right at those points. And so if we use those same dates for other agencies, then I think we've got all of it coming at once, which then puts everything together.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Morrell.
I agree with Councilmember Hitch, and also remind me when do we have to expend the dollars?
End of 2026, very end of 2026, December 31, 2026.
So December
26.
Plan C that we can reallocate and then they could spend it.
Yeah.
So we're not reinventing a new program to put money into that, narrow it down to 3 or 4
No,
programs.
that we have certainty is going to spend.
Correct.
And you have to reallocate and obligate before the end of 2024.
Okay, so I think that's what we need to keep an eye on.
Other thoughts? I envision us writing up that kind of proviso and direction in our budget for clarity and expectation management. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the capital facilities plan. I'm probably, yeah. I'm gonna ask Mr. Taylor to join me because I'm sure we'll need to engage you.
Chair.
So there's a I'm sorry, Councilmember Hitchin.
Can we take a 5-minute human recess?
Absolutely. Let's come back at 11 a.m. We'll be in recess until 11 a.m. The council's morning recess, the time is 11:05 a.m. We are back in our council budget retreat, and we're going to move into a discussion about the capital improvement projects and capital facilities plan. There's a cover memo here as well that helps council remember our identified preliminary budget priorities related to capital facilities and infrastructure. We said to ourselves that implementation of our capital improvement program is of high importance in investing in a safe transportation system and safe infrastructure that also helps to restore the environment, promote community resiliency, maintain and preserve what we have, and supporting our economy. We continue to say that we have a lot of work to do for a much safer transportation system for all users, especially vulnerable users. We've said to ourselves that supporting significant investments in the restoration of floodplains, removal of fish passage barriers, and other projects that promote community resiliency is important. And council has also said that we are interested in the timely implementation of park and recreation improvements in this growing, fast-growing county. Park and recreation improvements are very important to our quality of life. And there's interest in figuring out how to deliver in a more timely way. So of course, the capital facilities plan comes from many different fund sources, and it is delivered by the executive in many different ways, right? It covers roads and non-motorized, motorized transportation, ferries, airports, the sewer program, the stormwater program. There are so many different those kinds of facilities, infrastructure facilities. And then there's all the buildings and the improvements to buildings that are important to one county government. So there's a summary in the executive's proposal about how some of the transfers are being proposed to be made to fund some of the proposal. So that shows up in the chart here. When you flip over the one pager, we see a summary of the different major categories of the capital facilities plan and how much is expected to be expended, and a very high level description of the project. So for example, the transportation improvement program, 88 different projects, including 6.42 million of non-motorized projects for a total of $96.5 million of expenditures for just the transportation improvement program. We see all the other major categories here. Of course, all the details in the capital facilities plan, and Ms. DeMuth and other department leaders, we had an extensive discussion at a committee of the whole last weekend about all of the detail. We're reminded at the very top of this about the sewer rate charges, the increase for sewer rate charges to afford the plan, the ferry fare increases to afford the capital program here for ferries, and increases in hangar rental rates at our airports to afford those improvements. So it's a total capital facilities plan with the tip of $425 million. We've noted right before we went to break, we noted that 5 million of ARPA funds, interest earnings of ARPA funds, are in the executive proposal to transfer to the REIT capital improvement program for the Justice Center improvements. So there's a lot of detail in all of these capital facilities plans. They've been making their way through EIDC and the Community Development Committee and the Committee of the Whole as appropriate. So we've been wrestling with the detail in those forums. But as a reminder, all of the capital facilities plans are the next time the body will see the capital facility plans, both the capital facilities plan and the transportation improvement plan will be November 8th. we'll refresh the schedule before we leave each other this morning. But that's a big, November 8th is a notable day for us. Again, capital facilities plan and transportation improvement plan. They've all come out of committee by now. And they'll be at the committee of the whole on November 8th, up for amendment in committee of the whole on November 8th. Today's discussion is meant to prepare for that November 8th committee of the whole discussion so that staff can begin working on amendments as necessary for council to have conversation here in a thoughtful way. So let's begin that discussion. How does the proposal meet the council's priorities and what's missing? Are there investments proposed within the capital facilities plan that are in line with our priorities? And council stated a desire to prioritize completion of existing capital projects over planning for new projects. The conversation here I heard was mostly in parks. How do we get more timely completion of parks and front load that? So let's stop there before we get into the other discussions. There's lots of discussions we need to have here. But let's maybe pause there and see what thoughts members have. And then we can move into a discussion about the ARPA funds for the Justice Center, the needs for the health department, the needs for juvenile court. Maybe let's parking lot that for a moment and have our own focused conversation on that in just a little bit. So how are these plans meeting council priorities? What's missing? I'll offer that I do anticipate bringing forward at the committee of the whole on November 8th a proposal for council consideration that I think gets at this notion of parks and timely completion of parks. How do we front load implementation of these capital improvements in these parks and try to get more things complete instead of keeping more things in planning for longer periods of time. Putting in the next biennium, especially really front loading, accomplishing projects and improvements at parks is the gist of the proposal I plan on putting in front of council. Councilor Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have a clarifying question. On the front, it says, the very bottom of the table, multiple $3.8 million, building renovations to facilitate termination of Tacoma Mall Plaza lease. Is that building renovations at other county facilities to move people to those locations? We're not building something at Tacoma Mall so we can break our lease.
That's correct. It's renovations to other facilities to allow staff to move out of Tacoma Mall Plaza. And it's primarily, well, it's county road fund, sewer utility fund, and surface water management fund in that instance. When it says multiple funds or funding this 3.889, those are the multiple funds that I'm referencing.
Are we moving
Staff from those
PPW and
staff that are in the Tacoma Mall Plaza building currently will move to other locations.
is any of that the Justice Center?
I don't know. I don't believe any of that's into the Justice Center. This is strictly to facilitate planning and public works' move out of Tacoma Mall Plaza. It's not the Justice Center.
Is Planning and Public Works the only one at the Tacoma Mall Plaza? I thought we had
I don't
several
believe they are,
departments.
Yeah, it's only planning and public works.
Oh,
departments
okay.
in it.
There's 2 locations near the mall.
Yeah.
Are you?
There's 2 Tacoma Mall.
Well,
Oh,
there's a Tacoma Mall office building.
yes.
Which is the multi-story, 5,
Yeah,
6.
I got my picture there.
Right, and then the Tacoma Mall Plaza building is adjacent to it. It's
Across from the post office, directly
from
across from the post office.
It's a 1 or 2, it's a 2-story, maybe 3-story building. Yeah, and I couldn't tell you all the tenants at the Tacoma Mall office building, the tall building. Perhaps finance can, but
And that one we're staying in the,
my understanding, we can continue to occupy that building, correct? I'm looking for a lifeline from finance on this one.
Gary Robinson of the Finance Department. The taller building, I'm not aware that we have any tenants remaining in that building. There were some planning and public works offices there, which I believe had moved to the Plaza building. There was human resources offices there. Those staff, I believe, are at the annex. And there was an IT training center there, which was closed under COVID because training is now conducted remotely. And I can validate that with facilities management.
You
At
got
the-
your photo taken in Human Resources at Tacoma Mall office,
Right.
not Tacoma Mall Plaza.
At Tacoma Mall Plaza, there are planning and public works staff in that building, but there are other tenants of that building from private firms. So it's not only the county that's leasing space in that building.
Okay, so then the funds are coming because we're making space at the stop center and other facilities for them to, and then the lease goes away and, okay. Okay, that makes more sense. And I guess I didn't know we had two, so good to know. Missed that somehow. Thank you, Chair.
Vice Chair Campbell.
So I haven't cracked into this, but I wonder if in parks, we seem to have gotten into this imbalance of we're doing a lot of planning and not a lot of execution projects. And I wonder if that's a factor of staffing. If you have people who plan the next park and they get done with that, so they go on to the next one, they get done with that, they go on to the next one. If we have more people in the job of planning parks than we do in the job of executing the building of parks.
Mr. Kruger has done a lot of thinking for us here to, I think, unpack that very question for us.
So thanks to Councilmember Campbell, Mike Kruger, council staff. So for the question of staffing, there are in the budget 5 planners that are shown as being employed, with a 6th requested. The construction project managers, which are the folks that manage the projects for building parks, indicate an existing number of staffing at 6, with, as we understand it, 3 currently on staff. So there's been some turnover in construction project managers, so they're not at full capacity. And I am working on an amendment related to the planning staff that would eliminate one of the requested new FTEs that would be in the planning side of the field.
And we work to shore up the construction side. Higher up.
I believe they're actively attempting to hire folks on the construction side.
Excellent. Way to anticipate my question. Thank you.
Thank you for unpacking that. Councilmember Coover.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered what the nexus was for the road fund and the Tacoma Mall.
PPW staff at Tacoma Mall Plaza. So folks in the road who work on road fund projects who live at Tacoma Mall Plaza, they'll be moved to other facilities.
I guess I was looking at for it to be roads or something on
A
that.
lot of engineers at Tacoma Mall Plaza, a lot of folks in floodplain management and surface water management at Tacoma Mall Plaza, other PPW staff.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Morel.
Thank you. Just giving thought to what you said pertaining to, I think the council's desire to actually build parks and not still create master plans that are future thinking. You know, my whole time here on this council has been to build out a lot of shelved master plans. So I've actually given Mr. Kruger the go ahead to pull all my master plans from my area and put it into completing construction projects. I just think that's reasonable because I've seen these master plans sit on shelves for 20 years.
You got master plans?
But yet, you know, there's such a focus on getting these master plans done. I think the people in my district just want to see parks opened that are on the board And, you know, future one's great, okay. I'll let someone else deal with that, but for me, for my tenure here, I just want projects done, complete. So I don't want any more master plans.
Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm in agreement with that, letting the folks who are current plan for what's coming up in the near future rather than the master. And I don't know how it could be done, but it just, if there could be, you know, a Parks Division that works on projects and a Parks that works on programs. So we can keep the projects moving and not having to share. I just remember the day, I think, when when the market gave programs and the government didn't, and now it's kind of reversed. So we're putting out a lot of programs that can maybe be better served by the public or by the private sector. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I really think Mr. Krueger has heard this, and I think he's doing his best to put something in front of us to consider. So more to come on that front, on the parks front in particular. Vice Chair Campbell.
I wish I had the full history, but I know Metro Parks Tacoma many years ago started getting into the parks programming. And once they had a proof of concept that they could do it well, they were able to start a foundation that now brings in tens of millions of private funding and coordinates the outside organizations that are coming into their parks. And so it might be worth unpacking the history that they took, because they've vastly increased the amount of programming that they provide, but they vastly increased the amount of outside funding coming in to pay for that programming. Tens of millions would be a pretty conservative number on that, right? So, and so we were able to then use that system that they set up to do things like build community centers, and then use that outside system to bring in Boys and Girls Club and several other organizations to then activate the community center. So it wasn't just the shell of a building. So it was initial investments in programming at a government level that has led to a vast increase in private investment.
It's great when you have density. Thank you.
We talked a bit.
We can get more density out there for you. How much density do you want?
No, thank you. So we talked a little bit about parks. Our Economic Development Infrastructure Committee has discussed the Transportation Improvement Plan a couple of times now, moved it out of committee. It'll be up on the 8th for further amendment. I suspect a couple of members are working on amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program. I know making sure we're advancing Vision Zero and advancing other major projects that have been in queue for some time across the county are very important. We have a lot of transportation needs. It's a big, big county. EIDC talked about the ferry program and advanced the ferry rates and the ferry capital program out. I think I heard on Monday that Chair Fye and Representative Levitt are going to get us some new ferries, so Councilmember Hitchin doesn't have to spend so much time on it. That's what I heard.
What I heard.
I heard there's one floating around in Puget Sound right now. Probably get real cheap.
We've EIDC moved out the sewer improvement program, the surface water management program. CDC moved out the capital facilities with the other items with airports, emergency management, general administration, juvenile court, sheriff's correction, sheriff's law enforcement, solid waste. As folks have had more time to think about what's in those plans, especially what's in the next 2 years, is there anything else that's coming up for folks? Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, I think as we start to try and manage some of our leased space, I know that was one of the reasons we invested in the market building I'm curious, how much storage do we lease off county property? And what is that costing us? As we start to think about facility planning into the future, I know we would love to have all our records digital, but it hasn't happened yet. So I'm just wondering, how many different places are we storing stuff? And is there a way, while we start thinking about some of these larger projects or any of these areas where if we're gonna go in and repurpose some of the space and it changes how it's being used, are we creating a need to now move the boxes that were over in this space, now have to go somewhere else and releasing space? And I know I've heard from several departments that have records that they have to go get. I know we're talking about the property room, but just, we have a lot of stuff. And so just understanding, we're working on people now, but we also have stuff. So just understanding that and how that could interplay.
So Taylor captured the question. We'll seek follow-up from facilities management. I will just offer for the, I anticipate bringing forward an amendment on the sewer improvement program. And an amendment that directs the department to move forward with the design and engineering on the methane capture of the wastewater treatment plan to capture that gas. The Tacoma wastewater treatment plant down in Commencement Bay just recently completed this project in partnership with Puget Sound Energy. They fully capture all the methane gas that otherwise would get flared through the wastewater treatment process. They fully capture it and they get renewable energy credits as a result of it. Again, working with Puget Sound Energy and turn it into revenue and put the gas back into the system. And it goes into heavy duty trucks like solid waste trucks and recycling trucks and that kind of truck that uses that kind of gas. So that's something of interest that I intend to bring forward to have the department advance the methane capture at our wastewater treatment facilities. Before we move on to talking about ARPA, Justice Center renovations, all those kinds of things, and Health Department and Reman Hall, before we get there, what else is coming up for people? Councilmember Morel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You brought up sewer improvement program. I remember a few years ago when they brought a proposal to do solar down there with PSE. And I don't know if it was ever pursued, but we did have some funding for it. And then I think for some reason it was pulled back. But since we're looking at projects down there, I would like to revisit that and see why it kind of fell off. I thought it was a good idea. I think Chair Young brought it forward.
There's a lot of unused ground down there. We'll get an answer. Vice Chair Campbell.
Two things. I love the methane capture, also from an economic development standpoint, because we want to activate that central meadow, and depending on the wind and which way it's going, its ability at economic development success can depend on how much we capture that methane versus let it waft over the crowds of concert goers. I did notice that in the parks, and I don't have it pulled up right here, with the central meadow improvements, Commencement Bay, they were looking at some minor improvements this year, but the big lift to make it more of a event venue kicked back to the second year. But we have organizations that are ready to program it now and are ready to bring concerts and jobs and events in now. So why wouldn't we fast track investment? I mean, most of it got backed up and we delayed a long time doing investments at Chambers Bay because of the whole other partnership we had going. And so while we're doing that, and while they kept asking for extensions, we kept not doing things. This is another case where the deferred maintenance is coming back and biting us in the behind. And so I see Mr. Kruger may have given this some thought, so I will stop talking.
Thank you. Again, a very good question, Councilmember Campbell. The proposal you're talking about is a $900,000 project at the Chambers Creek Central Meadow. $650,000 of that funding, so the large majority of that is a 2025 grant application. So there's no money available to even get started in 2024. And the hope is that the 2025 application will be successful. But that's the reason for the sequencing. The money is not there. Another thing to point out, so $650 for a grant that we're looking to get, and then there's $100,000 of the project that's unfunded. So that's $750 of the 900 is speculative.
How much do we anticipate in economic development making off of that site if we were able to activate it?
Trillions.
You just solved our funding
Budget
issues.
Thousands to get trillions back. It's more philosophical, but if we know that investing the money will have a return, then, we can almost, at least in our minds, look at it like a TIF where, we know we're gonna make X amount of revenue if we do the upgrades. Let's do the upgrades. So
If you'd like to, Councilmember Campbell, work on an amendment with me to fast track that and not rely on the grant funding, that's something we can work on. But it would take cuts in other areas of the capital plan as proposed.
Do you know the grant source they have their eye on?
I don't.
I believe it's LTAC, Lodging Tax Advisory Committee funding. That's my
well,
understanding.
since we are watching tax advisory
exactly.
committee,
Pretty
why are we
promising.
not funding that when it has a great potential for economic return and development?
Councilor Gruber?
Amy.
I lied on it.
You're on LTAC. I think
You're
that's why we
still
went to.
dreaming of the trillions.
Trillions was good.
I'm sorry, the conversation was the grant that they're looking at in the future to fund improvements in the Central Meadow, which would have an immediate economic impact right back with jobs and entertainment, is out of LTAC. But if we run LTAC, you're on LTAC, why are we not funding that when it has a high rate of return?
I'll have to check with my people.
Thank you.
Isn't it on the GPA? Not,
It's a grant program, right? So in this case, parks would apply, it would be considered among, so that if you can move it to the top of the pile, Councilmember Gruber, the county would be.
over in Chambers.
I know that's not your district, but it would have you'd be talking events with thousands of people attending that currently aren't being held in Pierce County anywhere. So the outcome on that. Maybe I can ask finance or someone knows off the top of their head, how much balance is there in the LTAC fund? Because I think it went unused a couple of years.
No, it's all
You can look.
Small.
well discussed.
Mr. Muth is saying small.
All right. It was big for a little while.
I'm sure Mr. Boki will have an answer soon.
Wait, but someone's small, depending on the budget, small can be.
Maybe
We
myself.
only got 4 million in there.
Okay. I'm gonna take these out of order if that's okay. I'm gonna move us to a discussion about facilities that support the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. And also we began talking about the age of Reman Hall. Those have both come up in the facilities discussion. So on the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, I think we're due a report today. Today's November 1st. I think
In
we're.
our packet.
Oh,
It's in the packet.
I didn't get to it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will make time to read that.
It's a very large number, but Raymond Hall is big. I looked.
I did not get to that part of our packet. So we're not going to be able to afford to address the health department or Raymond Hall in its entirety, or maybe even at all this biennium. But I feel like we have to have conversation about what the path forward is for these facilities in particular. We've done a lot of planning and a lot of appropriation for a lot of other facilities. These seem to just hang out. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. I guess a clarifying question, and just for understanding, I know that the county city building, our courts and our offices need to remain in Tacoma. Is that true for our juvenile justice programming and because there's courts involved, and the health department? Do they have to stay within the city limits of Tacoma? I just don't know.
Chair Merrill, I would need to check on that. I know the applicability associated with the executive and the council. I believe courts may need to be within the county seat. Whether Raymond Hall is required to be in the county seat, I'll need to check on that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. So there is a report that's in the packet.
So Chair, can I?
Please.
So yes, the health department report is in the packet. The report is not in the packet for purposes of the council's discussion today and approval. The information was received and staff erred on putting too much information in your packet under the assumption that you would want it, but council staff hasn't gone through the report yet either. It was delivered last night. The expectation would be that there would be a deliberate conversation about this issue with the council at a later date, likely after budget adoption, perhaps first quarter of next year. The same report has been given to the health department. It's my understanding in discussions with facilities that the Board of Health has not, as a body, reviewed it or taken any action relative to it. And that, I think, is a necessary component of the dialogue that will occur. What does the Board of Health think the needs are amongst the alternatives that are presented in that report? What do they think they can afford as a department or as an agency? Of course, dialogue with our partner, with the health department, the city of Tacoma, is necessary. All of that I expect would be first or second quarter of next year. But again, we erred on having too much information in your retreat packet today. With that understanding of why.
Thank you for that setup. Okay. Councilmember Denson.
Thank you. I don't know the history of this as well as the rest of you, but if it's a possibility that Raymond Hall could be moved somewhere else or rebuilt even on that site, it brings up the question of the $750,000 capital improvement that DEM has requested for the new radio system for Raymond Hall, whether we want to hold off on that. It seemed like a reasonable request to me, but if there's concern about major changes in that building, is that something we want to push off even a year to make sure that we're spending those monies wisely?
I think we should think, I don't know that we're going to get to, a crane in the sky related to Raymond Hall, whether it's in Tacoma or if it can be outside of Tacoma somewhere else. We're not, but in the next 5 years, I would hope that we have a plan for Raymond Hall.
Okay, so we're talking a while.
I'm just told my gut, like 5 years from now, we'll have like something designed, plan designed, site selected, maybe funded, maybe 5 years from now at the earliest. But that's not that far out to make a judgment call of should you really do this? Should you do this DEM equipment if in 5 years we're going to vacate that site and redevelop that site for another purpose and move juvenile hall somewhere else? I don't know what the plan is, but that building is old and sick. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding with the radio system, and could be my misunderstanding, was it was to make sure that they had access inside to communicate. And I know that if they're having trouble accessing it, I guess we could ask if it's something they could put off, but I want to make sure that those that are serving the youth, especially as the population is growing, can communicate appropriately. We want to make sure that those are doing that really important work are safe and can keep our kids safe while they're there. So I would worry about pulling that, the number that I saw, so sticker shock, everybody was like $100 million. So, and then the health department was $55 to $65 million. So $200 million for 2 brand new facilities, possibly. And those are brand new. So I don't know if there was remodel costs, but it's expensive to build. And yet there's such a huge need, and the building really is, the old and sick is a perfect way of thinking about it. There's sections we truly can't use. We can't put people there because it's sick. And I've been in schools that have issues where there's buildings that nobody wants to work in because, you know, it leaks or it's moldy or all of these above. And I don't know where Raymond Hall is in that. But if it's something like that, then keeping staff, keeping kids wanting to actually do the work to change their lives, really, I think should be a high priority. So I guess that would be my question with the radio is, if it's for internal communications to make sure they're safe, then I don't want to mess with it, because we aren't building next year. For sure.
Thank you. And I completely agree. And I was fine with the ask, especially seeing how far out we're looking. I don't think we want to wait that long.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilmember Coover.
Thank you, Chair. The issues with Raymond Hall, I recall discussions when I was down at the state. So that was before 2013. So it's been pushed off consistently. And I have to agree, the radio communications are kind of important because the kids are being more violent. And that's a concern. I don't know. I still, that property is prime real estate with views and could really, I think, generate a big enough sale to buy something and build something somewhere else that would be conducive. I don't know. I'm not.
Not the full construction of a new place. It's nice property. It's not that nice. It's on a freeway.
It just sits up where there's a beautiful.
A great view of the freeway, yes.
She's talking about Raymond Hall,
Raymond Hall. Yeah.
off 6th Avenue.
Yeah.
Councilmember Rowe?
Thank you. And I will agree with Councilmember Kitchen that I think it was internal repeaters, I guess they call them, because if anyone's been to Raymond, it is just a maze of walls and cubicles, and you never know where, at least I don't know where I was at. You know, even when I was a resident, I didn't know where I was at. Just throwing that out there.
That was the point.
You live there.
Yeah. Anyway, so I would say, and we can get verification, but I wouldn't touch it.
I think so. Staff has verified the understanding of the $750,000 for radio communication. To this conversation, there is a capital facilities plan item for juvenile court. So just talking about, are we throwing good money after bad or not? I'm not necessarily making that argument. I'm causing conversation. Are we throwing good money after bad? There is 1.47 million in the biennium. Yeah, 1.47 million in the biennium, and the description and this is at Raymond Hall. Replace and update the HVAC, replace main sewer line, ADA updates, remove the swimming pool, renovate the restrooms, replace generator, retrofit, replace plumbing fixtures, upgrade fire alarm, and replace main switchgear and secondary panels. So that's throwing 1.47 million at existing Raymond Hall.
Necessary.
So they're keeping the place afloat, to let it limp along. Please.
So in your packet, there is a memo from facilities management that talks about the assessment of Raymond Hall that's going on right now, supported by a consulting team. The scope of work for that assessment is included in your packet. It's my understanding from facilities management that they expect that work to be completed by the end of November, the final report. And so that's another item that the council, I would expect, would want to be briefed out on first quarter of next year and understand what the recommendations out of that report are. My understanding is it will get into some of the questions that have been asked today about, the future of that location. Is that the right location for juvenile court? Should it be relocated? Can it, you know, what are the costs associated with reusing some of the buildings, et cetera? But that work is underway and the scope of that work is detailed in your packet. Again, erred on having too much information, but the question was asked just recently, so we want to make certain you had it.
What's the electronic page number?
Can you say that again, Councilmember Cooper?
The electronic page number?
Oh, the electronic page number for that memo I was referring to is page 14 is the summary memo from facilities on Raymond Hall.
Page 12, I think. Is it my page 12? No?
I've got page 14 on my document.
Okay. Sorry, when the little, sorry, page 14, the bookmark, the electronic bookmark takes you to 12, but it really is 14. So what I'm hearing for the health department, Raymond Hall, is directing work in the health department case in strong partnership with the health department and our partners at the city of Tacoma. Those have to be really tight conversations. But the county council needs to be briefed and have a lot of conversation about the planning and the thinking and what resource planning needs to start. The health department, in my mind, needs to really drive this, and we need to be in close concert with our partners in Tacoma as the other major funder of the health department. So in my mind, in our biennial budget, we're directing that planning to continue and those conversations to happen in not telling the health department what to do, but encouraging those conversations to happen and those partnerships to develop. And then on the Raymond Hall, directing work to continue and come back to the appropriate committee or council venue for further dialogue. So that seems like the next steps on health department and Raymond Hall to me after this discussion. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. One of the proposals in the health department does directly impact our facilities because it's looking at the Soundview building that's right next door. It's the right name, right? Soundview. And using them to kind of stage the transition of the health department as construction. So as we're looking at our capital facility plans, if we are planning on moving more people intentionally to Soundview and doing any investments there, I guess I would just like to flag those and really think about that, because in the 3 models they presented, one of the least expensive ways is to use that building to be part of the process. And I don't know everything that's happening within that facility. So that's, I guess, an ask is to just, in our capital improvement program, are there things going on specifically in Soundview as far as investments, moving people, shifting people, that kind of thing? Because there's some bonuses to doing that. The second one around the Justice Center for Youth is, as far as the scope of work, do we know Raymond Hall was built in a very different time of how we dealt with youth offenders? And I'm wondering if part of the work is really thinking about the facility meeting how we as a county want to treat youth who are justice involved. Was that part of the scope of work, or was it just to basically replace the old system with the same type of facility? And because I don't know enough about it, just understanding that. And if not, I think that's something I would hope that TJ and the team are part of that. But I think the way we are thinking about how we want to deal with offenders, whatever type of offense, has changed. We've also got an older population that's considered juvenile, which it wasn't designed for. And so just really thinking about that aspect of that work and making sure that it's called out when this goes out, and might be something that we need to push with this budget to make sure that's happening.
Great question. Seems like the kind of conversation councils gonna want to have with TJ, Bull, and facilities department. How much did TJ Bull and the team drive the design of said facility, wherever it might be cited? So sounds like a very appropriate conversation for council to have first or second quarter of next year. question about what are we doing to sound view in this biennium, how it might relate with health department. And Ms. McDaniel heard the conversation, and so did Mr. Taylor, and we'll work to make sure facilities management, here's the question
Thank you.
and the thinking. Anything else related to Reman Hall Health Department? Okay. One other question that's flagged for this retreat in the CFP is, in the executive proposal, there's a one-time use of $5 million of ARPA funds. And for whatever it's worth, I believe it's ARPA interest earnings. It's interest earnings, ARPA, yes, says that in the memo. And Mr. Robinson confirmed, it's $5 million of ARPA funding that's interest earnings to be transferred to REIT Capital Improvement Fund for Justice Center improvements, to be able to do a little bit more in this building when we and others move out. Question is, does council support that transfer, or do you have other higher priority uses for that transfer? Other ideas about how to give facilities more money for the needs that are here? Vice Chair Campbell.
I don't have my head fully wrapped around what those needs are, but the fact that it's fully out of interest earnings signals to me that it doesn't look like it's done in the short term, but kind of on the back end of the bond that we have coming in to do the majority of the work. And if it's going to be on the back end, and we know that we got a pretty big realignment coming up mid-year next year where a lot of dollars will likely fall out, that we at this point reappropriate those dollars, but put it as something that is a priority for all the dollars that fall out at the end, and then it comes back to us to invest and spend.
So this memo's in the packet. It's a very thick packet. So finance was asked if we did appropriate $5 million, additional $5 million of this interest earnings, what are the intended uses? And we see here lighting improvements, cabling for new technology, audio and visual improvements, physical improvements to courtroom. That's what you would get for your $5 million. Is that a priority for these interest earnings, or do you have another priority? We, Vice Chair Campbell just expressed, I think, maybe waiting that this work is not going to be imminent in the first or second quarter of next year. We're not even out of here till the end of next year. If the whole thing stays on schedule, right? We don't move until the end of 2024. Executive doesn't move. So I think what I'm hearing from Vice Chair Campbell is there's more work to do. Others? I'll just put on the table as well. For whatever the needs are for improving this facility or any other facility, the other funding sources would remain the first real estate excise tax. The first real estate excise tax. There's not endless buckets of money in the first real estate excise tax, but that's the usual fund source the county goes to for our own capital facility needs. It's being constrained because of the real estate market. And there are plenty of needs for the real estate excise tax for the first REIT. I'm not conveying that there's an endless bucket there, and I'm not conveying that can solve all of our problems. And that's just a place where we've traditionally gone for county facility needs. Any other thoughts on this topic? Okay, anything else on capital facilities before we begin to wrap? Vice Chair Campbell.
I looked back and did find it, and my memory was correct about $4 million sitting in LTAC. Actually, it's $5 million. It was in 2023. It's reserved for future projects. So I assume that's future building projects, and it was 4.4 in 2023. Appears to have gone unspent. and they collected another 500,000, and they're just reserving it again for future projects in 2024, 25, $5 million. And so if we could get some follow-up, I see that 2.3 million is being given to the city of Sumner. But again, there's no detail to any of this, and that 2.3 is in addition to still holding back 5 million. So it seems to me that if the whole point is economic development, sitting in the bank doesn't create economic development. If it is to, so I would like to get and forgive me if this briefing came in one of the meetings I wasn't here at, but some real drill down on what we have going on over there. Because while there were a variety of expenditures in 2020 and 2021, including DuPont Soccer Complex, American Lake Golf Course, infrastructure, parks. In 2023, nothing. In 2024, nothing. In 2025, nothing. So it's like they've just stopped investing in our community. So if I could get more information, that would be great.
Mr. Bookey heard the question and will help facilitate a response. Councilmember Morel.
I think it's just a quick question on changes within the 88 projects on TIP. Do we get with you, Mr. Taylor?
Yes, you're seeking amendments potentially? Yeah, yes, please.
Okay.
And looping back, they go from 2.2 million in 2020, 2021 to 5.3 million. This is their just total budget coming in to 9.5 million. So there we go. You can see that it's a lot of revenue pouring into it and nothing being expended. So I'd like to see the plan on this.
Thank you. Mr. Bookey got the question. Any other thoughts on capital facilities? Okay. Mr. Taylor, could you, I'm going to ask you to give a reminder about what we have in store for tomorrow, so people can be thinking about that overnight, what tomorrow's plan is, and the near term plan, so members can begin thinking about next steps.
All right, thank you. So you do have your last budget retreat tomorrow. It's possible that you may only need a half a day for that retreat. The retreat schedule was laid out in such a way so that that last day was intended to be a flex day, a day that items could be continued to, as well as a discussion of some specific items. And so tomorrow, the agenda is a discussion of the miscellaneous current expense allocations that are proposed by the executive within his budget proposal. A review of the community requests, not by individual projects, but the process in light of the action that the council took yesterday. So what are the different thresholds for exempt purchases, the community need program thresholds, and then other thresholds. So just a little refresher on that for members to make certain that everybody has the same understanding relative to that in the budget process. The chairs asked for a review of the budget monitoring notice and approval requirements that have traditionally been within the budget. So these are things like the grant notice requirements, contract approvals when a certain threshold's been exceeded. So I run through those. And then Paul will run through the budget schedule and then a refresher on the process. So that's the retreat tomorrow. It's possible that you'll be done by noon, by lunch. And then if you want me to touch on the following week?
Yeah, let's give a preview for the following week so folks can understand. We're going to start, we finish retreat tomorrow, and then next week we start moving things out of committee of the whole to full council. So Mr. Taylor, start helping folks think about next week and what next week brings in terms of starting to move things out of committee of the whole to full council.
Okay, so you do have two committee of the whole meetings next week. The first one's November the 8th, the second one's November the 9th. As the chairs previously indicated, on November the 8th, the first item on that agenda is a review of the chair's budget amendment number 1. So this is the, I'll call it an omnibus amendment. It's an amendment that captures all the various priorities identified by the chair, as well as items that the chair wishes to include from individual member requests. And as a reminder, the chair did put out the amendment request form that has a due date of Friday close of business to Mr. Boki. And so that will be considered with that chair's amendment number 1. On November the 8th, there's also several proposals that will be before the committee of the whole. The first is a transportation improvement program. So any additional amendments that are desired for the TIP, that would be an opportunity to offer those amendments up. Capital facilities plan will also be before the committee of the whole. The same applies there. If there's any amendments that you wish to have considered, that is the time. And then the respective trailers to the budget. So there's a couple of ordinances that help facilitate the implementation of the budget, as well as a resolution that does the same thing. Those will be there on November the 8th. It's possible that the committee may choose to continue those trailer items until the next day, so that any amendments necessary in the context of Chair's Amendment 1 could be considered at that time. So that's the proposal for November the 8th. November the 9th will be the actual biennial budget offered up for its first hearing with the Chair's Amendment 1, and then in any items that were continued from November the 8th. So that's the plan that staff has currently laid out to help move this process along.
And then the 10th is, Friday the 10th is a federal holiday, Veterans Day. So we're doing budget stuff again next Wednesday, Thursday. Some folks will be working on Veterans Day and the weekend, but it is a federal holiday, so we don't have an official meeting on the 10th. But we're trying to move our budget out of committee of the whole to the full council, and then council will be able to make as many amendments as they want on November 14th, and then another round of amendments on November 21st, and hope to adopt. The plan is to adopt the budget on November 21st because our staff needs a lot of time to wrap up all the amendments into the final bill, and then we need to transmit it to the executive. We're supposed to have by law, we have to have a balanced budget approved by December 1st. So there's a lot of work to do by the time we pass it on November 21st, get it to the executive for him to sign it and stay compliant with state law. Any thoughts about those next steps? Okay, opening lunch is here, but let me open it up to any other budget related business before we adjourn. Is there anything else for the good of the order this afternoon?
We're coming back after lunch.
We're not.
Okay.
We have a session tomorrow, so we'll make space for a catch-all. Anything folks want to talk about tomorrow, in addition to miscellaneous current expense and the other items Mr. Taylor talked about that we have planned for tomorrow. So the lunch is ready. It's a hot lunch. And this is all, this is going to adjourn us for today unless anyone has anything else right now. Seeing no other business, we are adjourned.